Tonight we're going to start our second to last church, Revelation chapter 3, the Church of Philadelphia. This is a good one. He has a lot of great things to say about the church. He has a lot of encouragement for them, and he has no condemnation of them. So it's interesting because he wrote a lot to a church that was struggling and having a hard time, a very stern letter, kind of lengthy compared to the other ones. And now we get the opposite. This is a little bit more lengthy, but it's not at all stern. It's very loving, very encouraging, very much an uplifting letter. If you remember, the church of Ephesus left their first love. The church of Pergamos was a compromising church, gave in to false doctrine. Smyrna was a persecuted church. Thyatira was corrupted and worldly. And then Sardis was dead. Not much else you can say about it. They're dead. And now here we have Philadelphia. And if you could say anything about Philadelphia, the caption would probably have to be faithful. What a wonderful way to be remembered. Let's start reading tonight in verse 7. And we'll read down through verse 13, probably not getting all the way through this evening. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth and no man openeth. I know thy works. Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from God, and I will write upon him my new name. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Let's pray. Father, as we read through these letters to the churches, we get a wide variety of messages. We get challenges and rebukes and exhortation and encouragement. And I trust that as we read your word and as your Holy Spirit illuminates in our heart, that all of those would be present, that we would welcome them all, that we would use them all, that we would appreciate them all. And tonight, as we wrap up our service with our communion service, help us ever to be appreciative of the shed blood of your Son, Jesus Christ, on the cross of Calvary. Help us to realize what a great price it was to purchase our redemption. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. He starts off here, he is writing to the church in Philadelphia. The meaning is brotherly love. And it's interesting because there are two brothers that ruled, one right after the other. And a lot of folks say that this city was named after the younger brother, who was very faithful and loyal to his older brother and loved him a great deal. And so when his brother built the city, he named it Brotherly Love in honor of his younger brother, who eventually took over governing it. It is located along a trade route near the Cogamish River. We studied two of the churches that are along the Hermas Valley. This one branches off to the southeast, I believe it is. And easiest ascent from down at the Hermas Valley, where these other cities are, up to what is called the Central Plateau. And because of that, this town is known as the Gateway to the East. If you were going to do any trading to the east, you would go by the city of Philadelphia. It's located 580 feet above the trade route, looking over the top of it. But it's not a super fortified city like we've seen before. before. It does have some trade, it does have some things like that. That's not what the city is known for. This one's a little bit different. This city was started as a center for Greek culture and language. And they hoped that they would spread the Greek culture as they went eastward and throughout. And they actually did such a good job of it that the Laodicean culture became very Greek in its origin because of these folks. They had some libraries there. They prided themselves on studying and on having all kinds of culture, which is interesting because we had this little church that became students of the Word. And you'll see as we go through tonight that they were very faithful to God's Word. Not so much caught up with all of the other things that many of the other cities were caught up on the way. Interesting side note, it is on the edge of volcanic land. It was called the burned land off to one side of it. And it was very suited for vineyards, so it was kind of a quiet and peaceful area with a lot of vineyards around. But if you're on the edge of volcanic land, it's also suited for earthquakes. One of them destroyed the city. Rome helped rebuild it, and so they actually renamed the city from Philadelphia to honor one of the emperors. And several years later, there was a lot of damage again. They renamed the city again. And so when you look in history, you might find any one of three names describing this particular town. What was interesting is I read that the aftershocks of the big earthquake that affected Thyatira and Sardis and some of the other cities in the area, the aftershocks were so bad in Philadelphia that most of the citizens wouldn't stay in the city at night. They would come into the city and work during the day, very fearful. And then at night they would go out and live in booths and caves and stuff outside the city because there were so frequent aftershocks in the months following that they never knew what to expect. So they lived in fear for quite a while. To this group, he writes a big letter of encouragement. And it's kind of interesting, not only in the tone that it takes and the length that it takes, but in the introduction that he has. Every time we have introduced a letter to a church, he has gone back to chapter 1 and pulled key parts of how John saw Jesus Christ when he was standing there in heaven. And we took quite a long time studying chapter 1 because it's the basis of a lot of things that happen later as we start to see these judgments unfold. Only here, to our sixth church, to Philadelphia, he doesn't use a single reference from chapter 1. Instead, what he does is he goes back to several passages from the Old Testament and he pulls phrases and he introduces himself in that way. So it's interesting because in chapter 1 we have this incredibly awesome, majestic figure. And when John sees him, he is just overcome by every different aspect and all these things that we see. And then Jesus chooses not to introduce himself to the church that way when he's writing. Let's look at it. The character of Christ is found right off in verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy. Holy. This is a direct claim to deity. Luke chapter 135, Acts 2:27 and 3:14, and Psalm 16:10 all use the phrase or the term, the Holy One, in referring to Jesus Christ. And if you go back to the Old Testament in 2 Kings 19:22 and Isaiah 5:24 and Psalm 71:22 and in Jeremiah 51:5, all of those, and those aren't exhaustive references by the way, but all of those refer to the Holy One of Israel as being God. And it's the same term. So in the New Testament, when Jesus Christ is walking the earth, they are calling him the Holy One, and sometimes the Holy One of Israel. And in the Old Testament, you have situations where God says, why have you abandoned me, the Holy One of Israel? So it is a very direct claim to deity. It's also a very pure word. If you want to describe something, you can say, well, that was exciting. But if it wasn't just exciting, then we start throwing adjectives at it. Paul does that, when he gets when he gets excited, he starts running on sentences and linking words together. Can you ever think of a reference in the Bible where holy is ever used with an adjective? God was extremely holy. God was awesomely holy. Jesus Christ was really, 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 really holy. I mean, it sounds like a young person writing a paper today, right? No. Every time we use this word, we say what? God is. That's it. Can you imagine the angels flying around in heaven saying, awesomely holy, wonderfully holy, incredibly holy? No. It really like diminishes the word, doesn't it? There's nothing that you can put with holy to make it sound any better, because it's holy. Now let me ask you a trick question. You got your thinking caps on? If you had the eyelid of a fruit fly less holiness, you would be what? You'd be unholy. Remember when we were in Ephesians and we were talking, maybe it was 1 Peter, maybe it was both. We were talking about clean. And I asked you how clean is clean. Because if you get a little bit of dirt on you, are you clean? No. You are not clean. You are to some degree dirty. And so what's so interesting about this is he introduces himself to this church. We have seen a church that is worldly. We've seen a church that is corrupted. We've seen a church that's flat out dead. They just don't have much going on, and they are in imminent danger of instant judgment. I mean, Jesus says, you better be watching, or I'm coming like a thief in the night, and this isn't going to be good when I get there. Now he writes to these guys, and he says, I want you to know that the one that is holy. What's the big deal about being holy? This word talks about character. It talks about the motives of the heart, the purpose of the mind, the quality of thought. In other words, when you say God is holy, you are saying that he is always good and that he is always right. There's no weaseling around. There's no underhandedness. There's no scheming. There's never even a thought in his mind of something that is not right. Not towards people, not towards anything. That's what holiness means. So here you have this person stating here, it is a term of purity, and he says to them, I don't have anything against you. I have no rebuke, I have no warning, and I have no condemnation. Do you see how powerful a message he said to this church? With one simple word. He goes on, not only does he say that he is holy, he also says that he is true. He's true. Holy and true. You say, what is the big deal about being true? Well, what he does stems from who he is. And when, true is an action word. It means to be genuine, authentic, or real. Now, you've probably heard before, in Roman times when they made pottery to carry something, if you fired it in a kiln, sometimes you get a little crack in it. And in order to make sure that it was an authentic piece and that it was genuine, you could stamp the bottom of it if it was a certified, kind of like we do today. We certify that this is 99.9% pure silver or gold, or that this is a genuine china or whatever. They put a stamp on the back of your plate. Same thing would happen back then. If it didn't have that on, and the people didn't want to waste the time and material, they could take wax and they could melt it and put it in the crack. And the only way that you could tell that was a problem is if you would turn it upside down and look at the sun through the pottery. Because the wax would show the crack. And you had to be careful because if you used it to hold liquid, you might be okay. But if you put anything warm in it or left it out in the sun for very long, what happens to the wax? And now your pot leaks. And so that stamp meant that it was true. It meant that it was genuine. It meant that it didn't have any defects in it. Now, think about the letters to the churches that he has already written to. Some of these churches had problems identifying truth. And he's writing to them, and he is saying, here is a person that is holy. That's his character. And here is a person that is true. That is his actions because of his character. Now, I want you to know that there are a lot of false people coming. We studied the church with Jezebel, right? Perfect example. There are a lot of false people coming, and they are going to claim to be ministering in my name, but they're not going to be ministering in my name. I want you to know that I am without error. Therefore, I am reliable and trustworthy. And as he writes this lengthy letter to them, it's important that they realize that he is trustworthy. He's also going to use a very interesting phrase here that we don't see very often. He that hath the key of David. You say, what in the world? Well, let's take it apart. It's compound, right? Key of David. What does the key symbolize? We have seen this before. It is a symbol of control and authority. In chapter 1, verse 18, we see him pictured there, and he has the keys of what? He has the keys of death and hell. Well, why doesn't he write to the church at Philadelphia and stand there with the keys of death and hell if he has authority? Because he's not telling them he has authority over death and hell. He's telling them he has authority over the kingdom of David. Let's go there, chapter 9, verse 1. You'll see again, we're into the angels and the trumpet judgments. And it says, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him given the key of the bottomless pit. You say, why was there a key to the bottomless pit? Well, the key represents the authority and the control over it. Notice that the angel does not fly around keeping the key. Somebody else kept the key, and when it was time for him to act, he was given the key. In other words, he was given the authority over the bottomless pit. He doesn't keep the authority from it to the bottomless pit. Somebody else does that. In chapter 20, verse 1, you see it again. We're way late in the book, and all these judgments have happened. And it says, I saw an angel come down from heaven. Maybe it's the same one. Maybe it's a different one. No, God didn't choose to tell us. Having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. So he has been given the authority to get ready to do something. And you'll see when we get there, he's going to lay hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil. Notice that in Jude, the angels will not even revile Satan. But in Revelation chapter 20, verse 1 and 2, one of them binds him with a chain and throws him into the bottomless pit. You say, what's the difference? The difference is in the authority that he's been given. That's the difference. Now go with me to Matthew chapter 16, verse 19. Because it's important that you see you've been given great authority also. You probably don't even know it. If you don't know it, then you can't live like it. He's talking to Peter. He says to him in verse 19, and I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. You say, why is that such a big deal? By the way, it's one of the reasons why the Catholics say he was the first pope, because Jesus Christ gave him the keys to heaven. What does it symbolize? He was given great authority as he ministered. So back in Revelation chapter 3, we see Jesus Christ standing there, and it says he is standing there with the key of David. And David is a symbol of the messianic office. He was the ruler of the people. Over and over and over again, during the prophecy, it says, and a son of David shall rule forever. Son of David shall rule forever. Son of David shall rule forever. And so that's why early in the Gospels, you have the record of his descendancy through Mary and through Joseph. Okay? One is the legal lineage and one is his actual lineage. Both of them are fulfilled, even though Joseph isn't his parent. It's still the legal lineage. So you put them together, the symbol of control or authority, the ruler of the people, has to be Jesus Christ. Go to chapter 5, verse 5 of Revelation. And one of the elders saith unto me, Weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. Now, John's all upset. If you go back to the verse right before it, it says, And I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look therein. Why weren't they worthy? They didn't have the authority to do so. And all of a sudden, he is called and he says, Listen, John, stop crying. Look, the Lion of Judah, notice it doesn't say the Lamb. The Lion of Judah comes, and it calls him the root of David. This is the one that holds the keys of David. He has the authority of the kingdom. There is one worthy, but there's only one worthy. There's only one that has the authority to be able to open this book. And John's just dying to see what's inside. Except he probably wishes he hadn't once he sees it. Go to chapter 22, verse 16. All the way at the end of the book. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. He's getting ready to close his book, and as he closes his book, his summary statement is, Mine angel is testifying these things in the churches. He starts off his letter writing to the churches, and he closes his letter saying, I am sending these to the churches. And by the way, the person with the authority to do so is the root and offspring of David and the bright and morning star. Notice the authority with which he acts. Isaiah chapter 22, let's go there. I was going to skip it tonight for sake of time. We'll hurry. Isaiah chapter 22, verse 22. We see this phrase again, but you have to be careful because this isn't talking about Jesus. All right? This is talking about a specific individual. And I don't believe he is talking about him as if he is a type of Christ. I believe he is talking about him as having the authority in this situation. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. Now, he is talking about Eliakim here. And Eliakim is the keeper of David, like the prime minister of David. And so if you want to go in to see David, what do you have to do? You go make an appointment to see the prime minister, and the prime minister either says, yes, you get to go in to see the king, or no, you don't get to go in to see the king. Does anybody argue with the prime minister of the king whether or not you get to go in and see the king? No. He has the authority to say who gets to go in and who doesn't get to go in. Every bigwig in our world today has one of these dudes who controls who gets to see him and who doesn't get to see him. They have that authority. All right? And so Jesus is writing to this church and he is saying, by the way, I have the key of David. I have the ability for what? Well, I have control of who gets into heaven or not. John 10, 7 and 9, he says, I am the door. In John 14, 6, he says, I am the way. And in Acts 4:12, he says, no man cometh unto the Father, what? Over and over and over again through the Gospels and through the Acts, he says, listen, I am the key. And if you want access to the Father, then you have to come through me. Interesting, because he is building this upon a church that was dead and a church that is polluted and worldly. He goes on, if we jump back to Revelation chapter 3, he is going to finish his introduction here with an interesting phrase. openeth and shutteth. You say, what in the world? Why does he do this? He that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth and no man openeth. What? I mean, we already know he's holy. We already know he's true. We already know that he is the key of David. What is he saying that he openeth and no man shutteth, and he shutteth and no man openeth? He is talking about his omnipotence. When I act, who can overturn it? You say, why is that such a big deal? Because we'll get there next week. He is going to talk about 4 admirable qualities, and then he's going to talk about some promises. And one of the promises that he makes to them is he says, I set before you an open door. Now, this is a small church. It's not large in number, and it's probably not really powerful. But he's going to commend them, and he's going to say, you have a little strength. You are accomplishing something for me. And while you're not a mega church, I greatly appreciate what you're doing. And I want you to know that when I open a door, nobody can shut it. And when I close a door, nobody can open it. In other words, when I give you the opportunity to minister, I don't care if the gates of hell are set against your ministry, and I'll prevail. In fact, isn't that what he said? Go to Matthew chapter 28. Because he gave them a promise right before he left. And the promise is pretty powerful, but we usually look at the verse 19. And sometimes we forget about verse 18. Verse 18 it says, and Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and earth. I open, it stays open. I shut, it stays shut. Go you, therefore, and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, who's with you? The one that has all authority given to him in heaven and earth. And so when he writes to this church in Philadelphia, he's doing the exact same thing that he did to the disciples all those years ago as he's getting ready to go. Listen, it's not always going to be easy. Hey, people aren't always going to be willingly listened. Sometimes people are going to be antagonistic. You might face pressure, but I want you to know that when you go forth with whatever power you have, when I open, it stays open. And when I shut the door, it stays shut. And nobody changes the purposes that I accomplish. I don't know about you, but that's a big encouragement to me. Because it tells me 2 things. If I minister to somebody and I'm praying for them and I'm sharing the word, and I'm sharing the word, and I'm sharing the word, and they never trust Jesus Christ as their personal Savior, is it because I'm not good at sharing the gospel? No. What he's saying here is results are not up. Results are not up to you. Notice he doesn't call them the productive church. He calls them the what? Faithful church. When I open a door, nothing can shut it. Take advantage of every single opportunity I give you. But be sensitive, because you remember Paul's running around and he says, I really wanted to go over here, and then the Holy Spirit wouldn't let me. And then I really wanted to go over here, and the Holy Spirit wouldn't let me. And all of a sudden, we turned and we went over here, and wow, the gospel exploded! By the way, that's a lot of the churches he's writing to. Where would these churches be if Paul had gone the way he wanted to at first? Doors. What kind of doors is he talking about opening and shutting? I can think of 2. For service. And then I can also think of the kingdom of heaven. Jeremiah 18, 2-10, he gives us an illustration of the potter and the clay. And he tells Jeremiah, he's going to minister through him, and he says, listen, I'm going to teach you a lesson, go down to the potter's house. And Jeremiah is sitting there watching the potter throw a pot on the clay. And he looks at him and he says, Jeremiah, do you realize that I can make it or break it. He's telling him the same thing that he told the disciples, and was telling Jeremiah the same thing that he's telling the church of Philadelphia. Listen, I can open the door, I can shut the door. I can make the pot any way I want to. I can throw it and discard it. I can do what I want to. I am the one that opens the doors and closes the doors. Pretty incredible picture of him as he gets ready to talk about their works. We don't have time tonight. We're going to stop for a communion service. But in verses 8 through 10, he's going to talk to them about 4 very admirable qualities. And the first one doesn't even sound like an admirable quality. I'm going to guess that if you walked into the weight room up there and the football team's lifting and you walked in and said, I want to commend you because you have a little strength, they probably wouldn't take it well, right? But that's what he does. That is how he opens his commendation to them. I want you to be encouraged because you have a little strength. You say, why is that such a big deal? Who did he just get done writing to? Church of Sardis. And the Church of Sardis is, in comparison to a church that's dead, you might have a small church, but hey, gang, don't be discouraged. You're not dead. You're not corrupted. You're not worldly. So keep that in mind as we get ready for next week. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Chapter 11, starting in verse 23. For I have received of the Lord that which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. When he had given thanks, he brake it and said, Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. After the same manner also he took the cup when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as oft as you drink it, in remembrance of me.